In this video, we're going to talk about why the gear reset or the gear wipe is actually going to be a good thing for New World, but also why there's actually been a strong reaction to the announcement that that is going to happen. There's also been a new Forged in Eternum, which weirdly sort of touches on this subject in a roundabout way. So let me explain. Now, I'm not going to rehash my previous video, but basically in a dev Q&A, they said that your gear is going to become obsolete and you're going to need new gear in the expansion, basically. Now, details are not really more forthcoming than that. We don't really know if Umbral Shards would be used. They spoke about upgrading gear. We don't really know what's going to happen. They've tried to answer it a little bit in the Discord, and Katie says this: your 625 gear is not going to become worthless, but there's going to be new gear to chase. This is a long time away too. That long time away basically means the expansion, which I think is like 6 months away. And if we're honest, it might be that you get new gear, and then a little bit like the mutations, they'll get a chase beyond that at some point beyond that, if that makes any kind of sense. So you're going to need your current gear to play in the next expansion. It's not that it suddenly gets taken off you and it goes away. You're obviously still going to need it. But yes, your gear is going to be obsolete. You're going to need new gear if you want to be at the high-end content, like pretty much every other MMO does. But there's been a strong reaction to that. However, it might be a vocal minority. This poll has only had 994 results, and 7% of people didn't really want to answer, they just wanted to see the results. But if we just go off the percentages here, because I can't bother working out new percentages, 22% of people are happy about it, 16% of people are unhappy about it, and then the majority of people, and the camp that I'm personally actually in, is that it depends on the new gearing system. And the point is, if we had to do everything that we have already done previously again, we would all be unhappy. Basically, if they just increased the gear score and changed none of the systems, none of the progression, nothing like that, we would all strongly be unhappy. Well, I think I definitely would. Some people would probably be happy about it, but I think those would be very strange people, but that's fair enough. Now, the recent Forged in Eternum is sort of related to this, because they're talking about how gear progression should be rewarding, and they spoke about some of the misses and some of the, what they think is like hits, I guess. One example that they gave and that they like to talk about is the Corrupted Rabbit. The first time around you could kill 1 million rabbits and still not get the chest, but the second time around they fixed it. And they did fix it, and I'm pretty happy with that fix. Basically, if you killed, I think it was 400 rabbits, you got everything. Perfect, fine. They also spoke about how in mutations and in PvP, basically you put a lot of effort into it and you don't really know what you're going to get at the end of it. They mentioned materia, but it sort of sounds like that they know that system doesn't really go far enough. They were actually talking about how you need to be able to get a good item, like an artifact weapon or whatever it is at the end. They didn't actually mention an artifact weapon, but you know what I mean? A really good piece of gear that you can maybe only get from Chardis and that you may actually want to just farm. And that for me, I think is a really good sign. And they spoke about how they're going to redo the PvP reward track. I think that's sort of okay. I'm not sure that necessarily goes far enough, but we'll have to wait and see how we go. But basically, in the Forged in Eternum, they were talking about how they sort of realized that there's too much RNG and not really enough points of places where you can just focus and get the gear that you want. They were speaking about how in crafting they sort of made it less random, but they acknowledged that if they basically made crafting not random at all, then people would just craft the best in slot stuff and be done. However, they then went on and talk about something that we spoke about before. What if you just gave crafters some really good bind on pick up stuff that only they can make for themselves, that you then get by getting all of the like rare stuff from loads of people or loads of bosses in dungeons and loads of materials from XYZ, but at the end of it, you know you're going to get a very good weapon or a good piece of armor, but only you can use it. Yes, they spoke about doing something like that. We also know that we're going to get a major gear overhaul. So we are going to be getting a new gearing system. We are going to be getting new progression. We're going to be getting quite a big change to this, and they want to keep that disruption to like one moment in time. Now, that's not to say that there'll be some kind of treadmill when it comes to gear progression. I don't really know how it's going to work, but I think we can agree that if we had to do the exact same thing that we've already done, a lot of us would be really unhappy. Be it if you've put in 100 hours or whether or not you've put in 3,000, 4,000 hours. To do it again would be a pain. If we had to get all of the ward gear again, all of your PvP gear again, you would be very salty, and I completely agree and completely understand if we get the same thing. Now, there's a question there whether or not New World and Amazon will actually be able to deliver a better system, but I'll tell you one thing, it's definitely something they should try and do. I cannot imagine a world where we keep the same gear that we've had for more than 2 years. The only MMO that really does stuff like that is Guild Wars 2, and Guild Wars 2 is really the exception, not the norm. most MMOs involve a gear chase. So the people who are unhappy about it, I think they're unhappy about it because they're not necessarily where we're going to get a gear progression change. If you are unhappy because you actually are being invalidated and you just don't like that as a concept, then the reality is I think an MMO might not be for you, or you may want to play Guild Wars 2. MMOs typically do this gear chase. It's one of the reasons a lot of people play MMOs, but that's not to defend the current system. As I said, if I had to redo it again, I'd be over. It'd be game over for me. But if I get a more interesting system that's more enjoyable, that's more controllable, yeah, I actually might be on board. I sort of like a vertical progression as long as that vertical progression is not too fast. So if we get vertical progression once every 2 years, I'll actually be personally thrilled with that. But if you're expecting your gear from launch to be relevant like 5-6 years after the game came out, then I think your expectations were probably unrealistic. So it depends on what camp you're in. If you weren't aware that we're going to be doing a new style of gear progression, then I can definitely understand why you'd be like, oh, I really don't want that to happen. But if you're aware that we're getting a new style of gear progression and you're still annoyed that your gear's being wiped, then I sort of have to question if an MMO's for you. Most MMOs typically don't go for horizontal progression, but maybe they should. I'm not really denying that. I know people have put in a lot of hard work, but that's just sort of standard. Some people are saying that they're going to stop because of this, but my argument against that is relatively simple. A lot of people have already stopped, and I think a lot of people have stopped because the progression and gearing system in New World is just not that enjoyable. And if they fix it, then I think we might get more returning players than the people who leave, and we might even get more new players than the people who leave. With all due respect, we could probably lose 20% of people who really hate the idea of any kind of vertical progression, as long as we gain more than 20% of people back. Yes, it would be harsh, and I'm not saying it's a good feeling. If the game that you play doesn't go in the direction you want, that is a pain. For example, if New World goes in a completely different direction than what I enjoy, and I had to sort of stop playing because I wasn't enjoying it, yes, I would be very salty about it. But it's not like they ever came out and said, we will never invalidate your previous gear. Your gear that you get at launch, you will be able to play with that forever. They never said that. So really, how can we be annoyed of our own expectations? You can't really be annoyed at that because we didn't know what we were getting. Now, the way that games do that, you can argue is frustrating, but New World and Amazon are not doing anything crazy there. This is pretty standard stuff. And a lot of people are saying, I've done all this hard work. And it's quite sad to see your hard work feel like it's been invalidated, regardless of the fact of how common it is. But one counter argument to that is simple. If you've put in that much hard work, then how do you feel it would be for somebody trying to catch up to you? If that hard work, it puts you so far ahead of everybody else, then anybody catching you is in a diabolical position where they literally may never catch you up. A reset is actually quite good for that feeling, for the people who are considering rejoining the game or starting afresh. And if your counter argument to that is it doesn't take that long to get best in slot, then why are you worried about all the hard work you've put in already? It doesn't really mesh that argument together, you know what I mean? It can't be so time consuming and so much hard work to get to where you are, but yet then so easy to get best in slot. And some people will argue both of those things, and that doesn't really make any sense. If it's the former, in which it's so hard to get to where you are, then a reset is going to help everybody behind you, and that's going to hurt you, but you're probably in a small percentage of players. And if it's quite easy to get best in slot, then a reset just helps everybody because we're going to get a better system. So I actually think in that way it's also good. Now, what should you be doing right now in terms of the game? Do you want to put in that hard work, getting all the ward sets and stuff like that? My answer to you is no. So my point right now is anybody who's thinking about, should I try and push to gear score 625? Should I try and do PvP? Should I try and do this, X, Y, and Z? You should probably try and do what you find fun. Yes, it's probably a good thing if you get gold, if you level up your professions and that kind of thing. That's probably for the best, but don't push it, don't rush it, just have fun. Do what you think you're going to have fun doing. If it starts feeling like work, don't stress. You're going to be able to get a reset in about 6 months time. So for me, it's a good thing because the new gearing progression or new gearing system, whatever the hell it is coming. If that wasn't coming, I would be absolutely with you guys. I would be very annoyed. However, I think we need those changes for the game to survive and the game to be healthy. What we have right now is a player base who actually enjoy being tortured, basically, because that's what you've been brought up on. In a way, it's sort of Stockholm Syndrome, but I think much better can and will come. So let's hope it's good. If it's bad, I'll be there on the front lines, on the picket lines, whatever you want to say, being like, hey, this system is also bad, but let's give them the chance. They're saying the right things in Fortune Eternum. Let's see what we actually get. And again, sorry to say, if you are annoyed at any kind of vertical progression, then you might want to step away from MMOs. I know that's a hard bit of pill to swallow, but I think that might be the case. But I'll tell you what I'm not a fan of. I'm not a fan of very fast vertical progression. I don't want my stuff to be outdated like every 3 months or so. I sort of like slow vertical progression. I would maybe be happy with vertical progression every 6 months. That carrot on the stick where you're chasing it, I actually enjoy that as long as it's done in an enjoyable way. The system with New World, I'm not a fan of. So I know a lot of people are probably going to be angry with me that I suspect the downvotes, the dislikes are going to be quite horrendous on this video, but for my money, I actually think the reset's a good thing. And I know it's not technically a reset and it's not technically a wipe, it's technically just new gear coming, but I don't really know if there's a phrase for that. It's not one that I can think of. Gear chase. It is what it is. Thanks again to my YouTube members. If you want to come and follow me over on Twitch, I stream as often as I can. What you should definitely do though is have a most beautiful day. Like and subscribe. Goodbye.